There's more than one way to get the job done. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and recently I did a video on two archetypes of colonels, 06s, which I call the birds and the bulls. On one hand, you got the birds, silver-tongued devils who can talk their way through the gates of heaven. On the other hand, you got the bulls, thick-necked yellers who aren't afraid of nothing and fight any man who says different. Just like any strong team, our military makes use of both types of these characters, and the smart action officer learns how to deal with both. But one of you left a comment about another type of colonel that he called the Honeybadger colonel, because Honeybadgers are notoriously impervious to pain that would stop other animals, and Honeybadger just don't care. Anyway, this actually is an archetype among colonels. Essentially, you see it when a colonel just don't care no more. This can be good, or, especially if you work for them, it can be horrific. Now, before I give you the pros and cons and tell you how to deal with these people as you move through your career, I do feel like I have to point one thing out. There's a lot of people who would lump the character I'm about to describe in with the officer who had prior service enlisted time, the Mustang. And frankly, I think that tends to overlook some of the legitimate positive qualities of a Mustang at any rank. You see, a Mustang, especially one who has about 5 years enlisted, has an entirely different career trajectory than, say, a West Pointer or an ROTC cadet. That Mustang only has to serve 15 years as an officer to retire. They don't have to make lieutenant colonel. They can literally retire as a major, and that means they're under a lot less pressure to play the promotion game. Add that to the fact that most Mustangs have a really good understanding of company-level operations, and they're great. Some of them are going to make colonel, but that doesn't mean that they don't care simply because they're Mustangs. They just tend to be more committed to the organization and the mission than they are to their own career, which can be true of a Honeybadger colonel, but doesn't necessarily have to be. All right, let's focus on the Honeybadger colonel. I've talked before about how most military people retire one grade below what they really believe they should have attained. No matter what people say, it's a good bet that near the end of their career, most military officers had to go through a mourning process where they came to grips with some flaw or weakness in their career. And just like any mourning process, they go through the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then eventually acceptance. And just so you understand the Pentagon a bit better, many military people are going through this stage of their career after they get assigned here. It can be hard to work for a colonel who's in the anger or bargaining stages, but it is downright weird to work for a colonel who has reached acceptance. And these are your Honeybadger colonels. They accept that their military career is coming to a close, and they act accordingly. The only problem is that different colonels have different ideas about what it means to not care. On the positive side, Honeybadger don't care means that the colonel doesn't really care about his OERs. He places the well-being of his troops and his organizations ahead of his own career progression because he knows there isn't any left. And I know, technically that's what leaders are supposed to be doing, but upwardly mobile NCOs and officers can never really not think about their evals. But a colonel who accepts that he's going to get some center of mass, highly qualified, retain as colonel type OERs at the end of his career, well, he can really do some good. Just among his peers, he can take care of some of the low-profile minutia so that the high-flying colonels can focus on the really important tasks. I can think of 4 colonels that I worked with at one time or another who I thought had the really good makings of a general officer. And every time I could take care of some annoying detail so that they could go off and brief the Chief of Staff of the Army, well, I felt like I was a contributing part of the team. The same thing kind of goes for how the good Honeybadger colonels treat their subordinates. I mean, the good ones are still performing that interfacing function between the action officers and the executives. But because they care less about getting the glory, they have a tendency to let their subordinates shine through. And then, of course, you've got the Honeybadger colonels who use their sense of acceptance to take care of soldiers. I actually worked for this kind of guy back in a Brigade S4 shop in like 2005. He would do just about anything to get the soldiers what they needed, and he played a little fast and loose with the property accountability rules. And that brings us to how you have to deal with the good Honeybadger colonel. My experience has been that these guys tend to leave a trail of debris in their wake. I mean, they're doing the right things, they just usually aren't doing it the right way. And on one hand, that's a good thing. A colonel at the end of their career takes some personal responsibility for cutting a few corners, maybe ordering a few too many of those cool ballistic goggles, no problem. But when he starts handing those goggles out without having the soldiers sign for them, well, the goggles are on the command's hand receipt, and he's setting the company commander up for a bad change of command. I once saw my colonel take back $52,000 worth of equipment from a couple of soldiers without clearing their hand receipt. The soldiers were all too happy to have a simple and easy turn-in, but there was no record that the turn-in had ever happened. But Honeybadger just don't care. So the funny thing about the good Honeybadger colonel is you have to watch them close. For about 2 years, my job was basically following that colonel around and cleaning up any messes that he made before somebody got hurt. So I got really good at a little signature here, a little memo there. You got to take care of the BS that the Honeybadger colonel isn't interested in anymore. Now, not all Honeybadger colonels are good. I mean, the good ones stop caring about their career and they focus on the organization and its mission. But when they stop caring about the organization, I have seen colonels asleep in the Pentagon courtyard. That causes some talk. I have seen colonels tell general officers and SESs what they really think. And I'm not talking about telling their boss behind closed doors what they think. I'm talking about telling their boss's boss's boss what they think in public. And trust me, that is the fast track to persona non grata. But maybe the foulest problem that a Honeybadger colonel can create is that they just don't care about their work. I've said before that the main function of a colonel in the Pentagon is to act as that interface between the executives and the action officers. They amplify or attenuate the signals that are flowing between these two groups of people. To avoid miscommunication, they anticipate needs and they keep things on track. So when a bad Honeybadger colonel stops performing these functions, bad signals start flying everywhere. Action officers get surprised by pop-up tasks. General officers get the wrong answers to their questions. Frustration grows among the action officers and the executives. If you're lucky, your division has a seasoned deputy who is going to step in and keep the ship straight. If not, somebody's going to have to do it. Some lieutenant colonel is just going to have to step in and start doing the job of a colonel. In reality, this can be a great opportunity for growth. The problem is, nobody's going to tell the lieutenant colonel to do it. And rarely is this planned out. I mean, one day the Honeybadger colonel just has something more important to do and he just doesn't show up. And it's made worse by the fact that most people don't admit that they're the bad kind of Honeybadger colonel. My recommendation is just assume that a retiring colonel is eventually going to hit this phase. In fact, it makes sense that at some point they're going to put their own health and future ahead of that of the organization. Have a conversation with them about when this is going to happen, and then take an active role in developing the transition plan. And now, if you want to see the behaviors that make a great colonel, and by extension, a great stand-in for a colonel, watch this video.